The location of Glanworth Mill, when built sometime in the final decades of the 1700s, was a pragmatic decision. The river Funcheon would provide the energy to drive the millstones and sieves, while the nearby bridge would ensure access from the extensive grain-grown areas in the vicinity of Glanworth village. The commitment in establishing this flour mill was considerable. A 300-metre mill race from the river Funcheon had to be excavated, and the mill itself was constructed as a 4-storey building. The potential returns on this investment was to be equally encouraging. Subsidies on the import of grain and flour from the UK had to be removed. Foreign wars kept up this demand, with the need for biscuit, bread and flour for the military. The power source at that time was from the mill wheel, driven by the pressure of the water from the mill race. This mill in Glanworth was powered by an undershot wheel, and in common with all such mills, the grain was processed from the top floor down. A type of dam was erected at one side of the large mill wheel. This consisted of an oak wooden shutter with cast iron frames at either side of the shutter. These frames were grooved at one side and a tooted gear wheel fitted at both sides of the frame, and then connected by a steel shaft and a winding handle attached for raising and lowering the shutter, thus cutting off the water supply to the wheel, as the shutter when lowered to create a type of dam. When the river would flood, the mill wheel could not work because of water backup. Then the employees of the mill would have time off from work. Sometime in the 1850s, no doubt again for economic reasons, the enterprise reinvented itself as a woolen mill. 2 stores were removed from the building, and a carding machine and looms were installed. Printed in the Cork Examiner on Wednesday the 12th of November 1902. Among the local industries in the south of Ireland, one that holds a prominent place is that of the Glanworth woolen mills. The premises of this firm are situated at Glanworth, on the banks of the River Funcheon, and are extensively adapted for the purpose of which they are used. The mill is equipped with the newest and most up-to-date machinery, the motive power being supplied by a powerful water wheel. The goods manufactured here at Glanworth Mill comprise of worsted and fancy suitings, ladies' dress goods, Cheviot and Saxony tweeds, homespuns, blankets, flannel plain and coloured, friezes napped and unnapped, carriage and travelling rugs, indigo serges and horse clothing. This transformation lasted another 100 years, and blankets from Glanworth Mill had a wide currency at home and abroad, until cheaper, modern synthetic fibres ousted wool as a raw material. In 1957 to 1958, an Englishman named Derek Wade from Huddersfield in Yorkshire, which is the home of the textile industry, became involved in Glanworth Mill. It was then that the business started to gain momentum. Derek Wade sent the late Jim Lawton to the Huddersfield College of Technology for training in loom tuning. In approximately 1957, Derek Wade appointed a works manager called Niall McCormack, who was later tragically killed in a plane crash off the Wexford coast. Later on, Ronnie Hanrahan was appointed works manager. In the early 1960s, electric power became more prominent in the use of driving different machines within the mill. The first thing to arrive was a boiler to produce heating for the mill, as well as a method of drying the lengths of blanket material. Rows of heating piping were installed in a shed at the rear of the mill, and rows of wire grippers formed the means of holding the material whilst passing through the rows of hot piping, hence drying the material as it passed through. This machine was also a means of spreading the material to its required width. This was known as the hothouse, normally operated by Billy Anglum and Mick O'Brennan, but was also used to punish people who were not up to scratch. The mill wheel continued in use to the very end, but after the boiler was put into action, the looms and winders were next to be motorized, and so on until every machine in the mill had its own electric motor. Toss Bryan of Fermoy was the electrical contractor, but before him it was Billy Weemout of Fermoy. There is one window upstairs in the mill which was regularly used by certain people as a lookout for salmon passing up the weir. One could often see people who had nothing to do with the mill walking into the building and walking straight upstairs through this particular window, looking out, admiring the sights, when suddenly they would disappear in a flash towards the weir and into the river to gaff a passing salmon, and they didn't even need to have Wellington boots on. The mill closed for a short while in approximately 1971-1972, and then taken over by Harry Donegan, but only for the production of yarns, and this didn't last long, and the mill closed again for many years. In recent years, the mill traded as a quality country inn and restaurant, but despite of its idyllic setting, it now remains idle and abandoned, yet another victim of the vagaries of the national economy.